My grandmother was born into poverty. Her parents could not afford for her to finish her schooling, and so, at the age of 16, she was married off to a businessman, a man 10 years her senior, whom she had never met, who lived in a city far away. She went on to have 6 children, and she was determined that her children would not suffer her same fate. My aunt became a doctor and later a medical professor. My other aunt became an engineer. But for 650 million girls today, a century later, they do suffer my grandmother's fate. And little did my grandmother know that by making those decisions for her family, not only changed the trajectory of her descendants like me, but it even made a planetary impact. What if I told you that the most pragmatic way to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions isn't for everyone in the world to go vegan? And it's not even for all gas cars to be switched to electric, and not even for everything to be powered by renewable energy, although all those things are good too. What if I told you that the most pragmatic solution isn't even a technology? The answer is girls completing their high school education. You might find this surprising, but modeling estimates show that universal girls' education combined with family planning could avoid nearly 85 gigatons of carbon emissions by 2050 due to smaller population sizes and reduced pressure on resources. In other words, 2 whole years of planetary emissions gone. When girls are educated, everybody wins. Let me explain. Girls grow up to become women who can become the future scientists, the engineers, and the change makers to drive a better future. And think of the jobs that are so needed in the AI transition and the clean energy transition we are in. Women are needed in these jobs too. When women are educated, we tend to marry later and have fewer children. And then what happens is a magnificent shift, a shift towards cleaner air, water, and environments. The data shows this. Countries with the best environmental scores also have the best gender equality scores. Shout out to any Scandinavians in the audience. Yes. But unfortunately, this pragmatic climate solution tends to be ignored both by policymakers and climate activists. And to make matters worse, democracy is backsliding across our world, which goes hand in hand with regressive anti-woman ideology. But men have built our fossil fuel infrastructure, which has greatly powered our economies, especially over the 21st century. But that's also something the fossil fuel industry has noticed. And they have been actively tying fossil fuels to manliness. And there's a more sinister form of this. Academics call it petromasculinity. It's a form of toxic masculinity intertwined with fossil fuels. What this looks like is the men that drive smokestack trucks spewing air pollution for no reason, or the men who use their vehicles to block EV charging points, and even the people who shout, "Drill, baby, drill." So while men have built our fossil fuel infrastructure, together, men and women are building our clean energy transition. But I believe if we truly want to make progress on our climate goals, we must center women and girls. And here's how. First, we must educate all girls and end child marriage. This should not be a controversial thing to say in 2025. But here we are. And too often, this topic gets deprioritized by foreign policy leaders. And to that, we should say no more. This isn't just a girls' rights issue, it's a human rights issue, and it's a planetary and economic issue. We need to advocate for this even when it feels politically inconvenient. We also must ensure all women are equally represented in all forms of government and leadership. Cities that are most sustainable, Oslo and Vienna, also have higher representation of women in their governments. But men have typically promoted technocratic solutions to solving the climate crisis. Think of innovators like Elon Musk and climate tech investors like Bill Gates who promote climate technologies and breakthroughs as the solution. But in the first 9 months of 2024, women climate technology founders only received 1% of all global investment. 1%. We cannot decarbonize the planet without democratizing opportunity. So, if women aren't being funded to start climate tech companies, well, then what are we doing? Well, women are favoring community movements, political action, nonprofits, and family centric approaches to solving the crisis, which should be equally celebrated. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a big fan of climate technology. In fact, I work in it. But I also know it is not the only way we can solve this problem. It's going to be a fraction of the solutions. We cannot invent ourselves out of the climate crisis. We already have most of the solutions at hand. We just have to deploy and scale them. And women are very important to this. We also must guarantee full bodily autonomy and reproductive rights for all. My grandmother was adamant that her children learn, and my mother too went to university. But unlike her sisters, she did not aspire for a career other than motherhood. And guess what? That is wonderful because she made that choice. Nobody made it for her. Population is our biggest driver of greenhouse gas emissions. Our food systems, our transportation, our energy usage, our housing, and our industry is all designed to support our growing population. But let me be clear. I do not believe in regulating our population. I believe that when a woman is able to complete her high school education, has full agency over her body, has access to comprehensive reproductive health care and family planning, and the ability to choose how many children she wants, whether it is 12 or 0, without pressure from society, that is when we will see planet-positive shifts. According to the Malala Fund, if every girl was able to exercise her sexual and reproductive health and rights through quality education and had access to modern contraception, it could reduce total emissions from fossil fuels by up to 41% by the end of the century. When women are educated, empowered, and completely in control of reproductive health, greenhouse gas emissions decrease significantly. Let me repeat that. When women are educated, empowered, and are completely in control of their bodies, greenhouse gas emissions decrease significantly. And that's why I firmly believe we must also call family planning a climate solution. We must also include women in the design and implementation of energy and climate solutions. I spent much of my career traveling throughout Africa, and I would meet with women who were hunched over a cook stove or a 3-stone fire, inhaling the toxic fumes as she was cooking. Women are the primary users of home energy appliances. Think of the refrigerator, the cook stove, the dishwasher. All of these appliances are regularly used by women, and if it breaks down, a woman will think about how much time and energy and money is necessary in the replacement product. But in appliance energy studies, men typically have not ranked energy savings as a priority for them. Well, of course, they're not going to when they're not the ones primarily using them. But men, let me call you in now. Your life drastically improves too when women prioritize energy saving solutions and has equal access to the opportunities to invent technologies that do not even exist yet because her company hasn't been funded. When girls are educated, everybody benefits. We also need to ensure that climate funding supports gender equity, especially girls' education. We all know there is not enough funding being allocated right now to truly stop the climate crisis. And in our right-wing times, climate action is no longer really a sexy word. Now it's being replaced with words like security and resiliency. But climate financing is incredibly important. And one popular form of it is carbon offsetting, which, to put very simply, is a way to compensate emissions by investing them into projects that reduce, avoid, or remove emissions elsewhere. And yet, I was surprised to learn that only a handful of carbon offsets go towards girls' education, despite all the data that shows that is a climate solution. And it's so beneficial. The funding can pay for school fees, her uniform, provide scholarships. When girls are educated, everybody benefits. It's a win-win for planet and people. I believe that when we truly think through how to center women and girls in the solutions, that's when we will make progress. And I think a lot about the sacrifices my grandmother and mother have made for me. And I chose to become a mother. I have a daughter. But I'm not disillusioned to know that by the time she is 30, she and her generation are going to be living in a much harsher world than the one we currently live in. But my dream is for her to grow up in a world where gender no longer defines possibility. A world where she can freely choose her path after she completes her education. A world where women are leading the transition to a sustainable future. A climate positive future that feels like something to look forward to rather than to fear. May we wish this for all the children in our lives. Thank you.